When the Perron family moved into the old Arnold estate on Rhode Island in the December of 1970, they were given just one piece of advice by the previous occupants. For the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. The haunting began almost immediately. At first, the spirits were largely friendly towards the Perrons. The children, the 5 sisters Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, were the main focus of the friendly apparitions' attentions. They would, in fact, grow very fond of 2 of the spirits. One of these entities was claimed to be the benevolent ghost of Mrs. Arnold, who was reported to have tucked the girls in at night and would kiss them on the forehead. The other was Johnny Arnold, the boy who was said to have hung himself in the attic of the secluded farmhouse in the mid-18th century. So fond of the boy spirit were the girls that they lovingly nicknamed him Manny. He was said to have played with their toys and watched the sisters as they played outside. The family in general especially welcomed the so-called sweeping ghost. This spirit's presence would only ever be heard from a distance, the sound of a broom shuffling against the floor. Whenever the family would go in and investigate, they would find a broom leaning against a wall with a neat pile of dirt next to it. However, as time went by, it became apparent that not all the spirits on the estate were friendly. Most mornings at 5:15, spirits who smelled of rotting flesh would visit the sleeping family to lift up their beds, tossing aside whomever was in them. The Perrons also claimed to have encountered demonic forces at the farmhouse, who would pull on the girls' hair and limbs during the night. Banging doors and disembodied cries were also a regular occurrence. One night, the family supposedly heard a voice that told them of 7 dead soldiers buried within the walls of their home. However horrible these occurrences were, there was one entity which made the rest pale in comparison. The events were supposedly so terrible that Andrea Perron, now a grown woman, still refuses to talk in detail about it. Her only comment about the malevolent entity was this: "Let's just say there was a very bad male spirit in the home, with 5 little girls." Aside from these spirits, there was one which is now infamous, brought into the popular sphere by the horror film The Conjuring. Her name was Bathsheba. Much of Andrea Perron's adult autobiographical account is dedicated to this spirit. Bathsheba Thayer was born on Rhode Island in 1812. In her early 30s, she married Judson Sherman and gave birth to at least one known son, Herman. Bathsheba and Judson are believed to have had 3 other children, with all dying at a very young age. From what can be gathered from public records, Bathsheba and Judson Sherman lived out their days at the old Arnold estate, both dying in the 1880s. Their son, Herbert Sherman, outlived them, dying in 1903. During Bathsheba's lifetime, there was one incident which marked the familial home out as a place of darkness. It involved the death of an infant and the accusation of murder caused by an incision at the back of the head. The infant had been in the care of Bathsheba at the time, and her neighbours were quick to accuse her of being a witch. Sadly, such an accusation was all too common a fate for any woman who was in any way associated with tragedy and had attracted jealousy. After all, Bathsheba had much to make her neighbours envious. She was beautiful and had a husband who provided well for her and her young boy on a private estate. It would not matter that the justice courts found Bathsheba not guilty. The corpse of the infant would follow her for the rest of her life. Her neighbours continued to believe that she had killed the child. Many speculated that the infant had been sacrificed to the devil to bestow Bathsheba with eternal youth and beauty. Some rumours were all the more malicious, claiming that she had sacrificed her own children as well. From there, rumours spread like wildfire. The local community whispered that Bathsheba Sherman was a sadist who enjoyed torturing her staff, much like Madame LaLaurie of New Orleans in the early 19th century. When Bathsheba died, her body was said to have turned to stone. That was part of Satan's price for having granted her beauty. Andrea Perron, when writing in her later autobiographical account, has suggested that the infamy of the accusation levied against Bathsheba pained her throughout her life. Thus, by the time Bathsheba died, all that remained of her once beautiful and youthful self was a woman filled with bitterness and rage. A woman who had been tormented by the cruelty of her fellow man. In the afterlife, Bathsheba continued to nurture this hatred, howling angry cries in the night and tormenting all those she encountered. The Perrons claimed that Bathsheba would disturb the children by moving their toys around and making their things disappear. The spirit of Bathsheba, however, had a particular hatred of Carolyn, Andrea's mother. It was said that Bathsheba was infatuated with Roger, Carolyn's husband, and as such wanted Carolyn out of the way. Because of this, Roger only ever encountered Bathsheba's sweeter side, with nothing but light-fingered caresses and sensual advances from the spirit. For Carolyn, not only would objects in the house disappear, but she reported being physically hurt and emotionally tormented, her energy constantly consumed, almost like Bathsheba intended to possess her body. Before too long, the Perron family were exhausted and desperately in need of help. And so they reached out to the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, said she immediately sensed a dark spirit living in the house, Bathsheba. She pointed to a small circular incision at the back of Carolyn's leg, identifying it as Bathsheba's handiwork. Lorraine stated that the wound possessed the same characteristics as the one found drilled into the infant's skull, and that Bathsheba had indeed been guilty of the horrific crime. As such, Bathsheba was posthumously denounced as a witch. The Warrens declared the house to be diabolically infested, with all its inhabitants in danger of falling under Bathsheba's power. However, they stated that an exorcism was not possible because the Perrons were not religious. They did, however, attempt a séance with Carolyn in the cellar of the house. It backfired. Instead of cleansing the house, Carolyn was possessed by Bathsheba and thrown 20 feet backwards. After that, there would be no stopping Bathsheba or the spirits that had taken over the house. Ed and Lorraine Warren were forced to retreat. Even to this day, Lorraine is still traumatized by the old Arnold estate. In her own words, "The things that went on there were just so incredibly frightening. It still affects me to talk about it today." For years after the Warrens' visit, the Perrons continued to live alongside the dark entities of the house. Years later, they would leave the house and Norma Sutcliffe would move in. After the release of the Conjuring movie in 2013, fans of the film began trespassing on the property. This prompted Norma to make a response to the movie's claims. According to her account, she researched town hall records and talked to other people who had lived in the house. She found out that all the supposed suicides and murders linked to the secluded farmhouse did not happen there, but rather at other locations around town. The story of young Johnny Arnold hanging himself in the attic of the house. The case of an 11-year-old girl, Prudence Arnold, being assaulted and murdered by unknown hands on the property. The elder lady, Mrs. Arnold, killing herself in the barn. All most likely happened elsewhere. Even the trial of Bathsheba Sherman was found to be dubious, with there being no historical record of it taking place. Her grave, however, is known to be at a nearby Baptist cemetery. It is recorded that at her funeral, the Baptist minister honoured her with a eulogy, something which probably would not have happened if Bathsheba had truly been suspected of infanticide. After living in the house for many years, Norma states that she has never seen a ghost or spirit. It is, however, interesting that in 2005, the Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Hunters were invited to investigate the house. The team reported finding several cold spots and recorded a door opening of its own accord in the house. All of this surprised Norma at the time. Whilst the history of the house may have been muddled, either intentionally or otherwise, across the decades, it is possible that the house is haunted. Indeed, Andrea Perron and her family continue to confirm that the haunting really did occur. What is more, it is a possibility that the haunting was not directly connected to the house, but rather to the family themselves. After all, in cases of hauntings, children are often the focus of spiritual activity, such as with the young Daniel Lutz in the case of Amityville. Carolyn and Roger Perron had 5 daughters. Sadly, there is, however, little evidence for the Perron family's haunting beyond their collective testimonies. If there were evil entities at the house, it is unlikely that Bathsheba Sherman was one of them, as records show no evidence of any of the accusations levied against her. However, evil spirits or even demonic forces have never needed a name. If they exist, they would probably have no scruples as to how we identify and categorize them. Evil entities, much like evil people, would simply change names and faces to suit their aim of deception. Thus, much like the nameless serial killers who grow to old age and die quietly, the truth of what happened to the Perrons shall always be elusive. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give this a thumbs up to let me know. And if you cannot wait until my next video, why not check out the ones on screen now? Remember, the more you know, the more there is to fear.